Welcome to our first webinar at the Forum for Foreign Relations. I'm Catherine Perez-Shakdam. I'm the Executive Director of FFR, and I have the great pleasure today to have two wonderful individuals who happen to be also my friends. We have Benham Taleblu from the Foundation for Defense of Democracy, who's a senior fellow there. And we have Afshin Payaravi, I hope I pronounced your name correctly, who's the director of the Association of Iranian Human Rights and Allies. So first of all, gentlemen, thank you so much for agreeing to this webinar. It's going to take place weekly about different subjects, not necessarily the Islamic Republic of Iran. And FFR also launched a podcast called Talking Foreign. And I would invite everyone to sign up to it and listen to what we have to say with my wonderful colleague and fellow founder of FFR, Dr. Stepanenko. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce the subject of this week's discussion, which is Israel versus the Islamic Republic of Iran, perceptions and reality. And I'm going to start with you, Benham. First of all, you one of the best experts that I know on the Islamic Republic, and you've done so much. You've definitely, I would say, on the top of everyone's list. I mean, at least you should be if you're not. And I feel personally that there's been a bit of a disconnect in between what the Arab world and the MENA in general, how they're perceiving this not this fight, but I would say those tensions between the Islamic Republic of Iran and Israel and everything that has happened ever since October 7th. And how the same, I would say the same situation, or at least the same conflict is being portrayed in the media in the US. And yeah.
1 second. My apologies. 1 second. 1 second. Sorry.
Waiting.
Oh boy. Pardon me. There's a building inspection going on. I know
Oh,
we're doing this live, but they're doing a building inspection at the moment. Could
oh,
I
I
hop
see.
off and Afshin be in first?
Yeah,
And
no, sure,
then
sure, sure. So yeah, okay. So we'll start with Ashwin. So again, same question to you. There's been, look, a lot have been said and written about the Islamic Republic of Iran and Israel and the situation that we find ourselves in today in terms of, this conflict, this constant back and forth. Um, and for me, there's been a disconnect in the way that things have been perceived and portrayed in, I would say, the Arab media in general versus the West. And I'd like to get a sense of how you feel this conflict is being portrayed, whether it's being misunderstood. And also I want to hear from you, the how Iranians on the ground are actually perceiving what is happening versus the diaspora, whether there's a disconnect, because obviously I'm not from within the community and so I don't have access in the way that you do. So it would be interesting to see if actually people understand what is going on in the same way. And I have a funny feeling that they don't.
Well, from what I hear, first of all, greetings to everybody. From what I see from Iran is that a lot of people actually they are happy with regards to the attacks coming from Israel, in order to take down the IRGC in a way that that the power is going to be diminished. So in order for the people to rise up, because people are unarmed, and that is the only thing that they see, that is an armed group or another country they can come and disarmed or get rid of them in order for them to rise up, which I don't think it would happen. But anyway, that is what they wish for. But with regard to media, obviously Iranian media doesn't, this government based, so they're not going to show anything. They're going to show that nothing has happened and everything. And the international media, I think they are a bit biased towards the Palestinians and against Israel. especially Al Jazeera, which I think they're showing everything in the other way around. And their propaganda is pro-Hamas. The thing is that Hamas has lost everything. They don't have any ministry as such, but anything happens as soon as somebody's get bombed or destroyed or there's a something happens, the Hamas Health Authority, after half an hour, they comes up with a number of wounded, number of dead, and everything as if it was a proper government. Everything. Israel, after the 7th of October, it took more than a week to see how many people died or disappeared. But in Hamas, after all their ministries and everything, all the computers has been destroyed. They have the number of people. They have all the details of all the people and everything. So so it shows that the propaganda is working very well for them, and the West is complicit with them with regard to amplifying those propaganda.
Yes, but I want to understand particularly because obviously, I mean, I agree with you. Al Jazeera has been literally Hamas's mouthpiece. There's no other way to put it. I think that the West hasn't done the best job at trying to offer, counter narrative to this because obviously they keep peddling the same numbers, the same facts, and at least they given them their interpretation of what is going on. There's a lot of Israeli bashing, I would say. But what I find interesting is that if you look at Arab media, not Al Jazeera English, but if you go to even BBC Arabic, the tone is slightly different, which I think quite interesting. Like, for example, Saudi Arabia very recently issued an order by which no one can carry anymore, the Palestinian flag, for example, when they perform the pilgrimage in Mecca. They can't mention, imams cannot mention Hamas, during their Friday sermons, things like this, because they don't want to politicize an issue that they feel has nothing to do with them. They don't want, people to be indoctrinated to the views of Hamas and Qatar, and of course the IRGC and the other proxies. And so I think that it's quite interesting because I feel that, again, the way that people are now perceiving the conflict between Israel and, the Islamic Republic of Iran and the IRGC is very different within the Arab world, the Arab-speaking world, and the West, as well as potentially I would say the Muslim Arab diaspora, because obviously the diaspora is picking up, their news from Al Jazeera a lot of the time, whether it's Arabic or English, it's the same propaganda. But those who are back home, in the Middle East, have a different take on everything, and I think their perception of reality is I would say closer to that reality because it's not as tainted by this, anti-Zionist propaganda or anti-Semitism. I'm not saying that it's perfect, but there's a slight difference. What I would like to understand is just how much Iranian on the ground, not in the diaspora, Iranian on the ground in Iran, are aware of what is going on and how, where do they get their news? Because I understand that it's very difficult in Iran to have access to, anything other than RSGC propaganda. They are literally birthed into this propaganda. It's very hard for people to kind of break through. So how do they view it? Are they supportive of what? Do they understand what's going on? Do they understand the stake? Do they see Israel as a friend, as an enemy? Do they see Israel as a neutral party that get caught into, the RSGC, I would say, colonial ambitions in the region? Like how do they perceive that?
As you know, there's a lot of filtering in Iran, but still people that are bypassing the filters and are using internet to get all the news from outside. So they don't completely rely on the news that comes from the state media. And especially the young people, they are very aware of what is going on. And the good thing is that the Iranian populace is very educated. The young people are very educated. So they are not fooled by propaganda as such. And what is happening as well is, although there is some sympathy with regard to Palestinians, obviously everybody would have, But they know that what is happening, the root of it goes back to the Islamic Republic. Therefore, they are a bit supportive of Israel in a way, because they know that Israel is being a victim as well.
Hmm.
So that is why I think most people, they don't support what is going on with regard to what is happening with the Hamas and the Islamic Republic and Hezbollah does. But at the same time, obviously, there is a lot of innocent people get killed, and they they have sympathy with regard to the innocent people, but they do understand that what is happening is with regard to because of Islamic Republic.
No, I can understand. Let me brief everyone just very quickly because Benham actually makes his apologies. His building is being evacuated, so I hope that everything is okay. So
Cool.
as he said, he owes us a segment. I think we're gonna have to reschedule him at a later point. So I apologize for that, everyone, but not all is lost. We have you. Um, so let me move on to I want to ask you this next question because I want to discuss Reza Shah. I want to discuss the Crown Prince, and a lot of things again have been said about Reza Shah, whether he should come back, whether he should organize a transition, whether he should have a say, not have a say. Many things have been said. I think it's fair to say that the OSGC would not want him to come back for very obvious reasons. And I'm quite interested in your take on, first of all, what has been going on, because I think that over the past, I would say, year, and particularly, I would say 6 months, the Crown Prince has positioned himself not just as the heir to the throne, but quite literally, I mean, the only option really, because no one else is coming forward in a way that is meaningful, in that they can formulate, a plan for a transition, or at least, start a conversation with the Iranians, because of course, I mean, regime change will not happen from the outside; it has to happen from within. So I'd like to understand, first of all, how the Crown Prince is perceived within Iran, if conversations have taken place, how you would envision a relationship with Israel moving forward once the regime has fallen, and get a sense of how do you see a post-regime situation? Because there are talks that potentially Khamenei is terminally ill, although I mean those rumors have kind of popped up every year, so it's like a recurrent theme. He's still alive, so but still, I mean he's not going to last forever. So thing will come to an end. The question is leading to what? Are we seeing a return of the monarchy in the sense that it was before? Is there a discussion around, could we have a different format for the monarchy? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, obviously, I'm a monarchist myself, so I'm going to be a bit biased. But as you said, there is nobody else except Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi. Is nobody else who is known universally to take the role of the leader for this transition. Obviously, there is a lot he needs to do, which he hasn't done so far. But from past few months, I've seen that he's changed. He's put himself. He acted as a kind of leader. He's putting himself into the leadership role, which is very welcoming, and that because we didn't have a leader with regard to the transition. And this is every revolution, every change needs somebody to be at the helm to lead. And I think that is the only person that he can play this role. Obviously, he needs to create the kind of the strategy and the different sections, for example, with regard to the judiciary, to the military, to the with regard to the how to protect people, how to manage to fund the things. He has to create all these organizations, mini organizations in there to be able to um, um, carry out that change anyway.
What about
And
what about a constitution? Because I mean, I think it's kind of I mean, without a constitution, it would be very difficult to organize anything, really. I mean, let's
well,
be
I think that is next step. I think after transition, then we need to make a new constitution. We have to then we have to ask people what sort of you have to have free parties to advertise to go and to see who is going to win. We are going to ask people what kind of regime they want. I think in a democracy, this you cannot impose on people. Okay, we're going to come. We're going to have this and or that. But our Iranian culture, I think, invites the monarchy. I think it's going to be difficult with regard to the way that Iran is built, the different nationalities within Iran and everything. I think we need a unifying person at the top that a president wouldn't be able to do. I think we need to need that.
I'm gonna use this opportunity to introduce my my colleague and co-founder of FFR, Dr. Stepan Stepanenko, excuse me. So Stepan, welcome. Thank you so much for filling in for Benham, who had, I hope he's okay. He's in Washington, so I'm just gonna hope that there's no missile alert, at least where he is. So there's I think he's safe. So welcome to our podcast and a webinar, sorry.
Thank you. I cannot pretend to fill in for Benham, but thank you very much, Afshin, for taking part in this, and it's a pleasure to meet you. If I may, I'll barge in with a question. So yesterday, Catherine had an interview with I-24, and among the questions they asked was, well, what about the Iranian people and how are they responding to the Israeli strikes, counter strikes, I should say, against Iran? And she said that it is down to the Iranians to change their regime, which is a fair comment. It is the Iranian people who have to decide their own destiny. Very recently, in the grand scheme of things, we of course had the statement from Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi that he's ready to take the helm, if you wish, to set up a government for all intents and purposes for the interim period. This happened, as I said, very recently. He has been the Crown Prince for many years. So as a monarchist, as an Iranian, what in your view has changed? Because the protests in Iran surrounding, for example, the murder of Mahsa Amini were 2 years ago. So there were many instances, occasions in recent history, greater history, that could have spurred him to do this. Why now?
I think he has realized that, there is, because up to 2 years ago or even a year ago, he saw himself as a normal citizen, that he's gonna just help the Iranian people to be their voice in the West or outside Iran and help them to overthrow in that way. But then I think he has realized that he needs to be more than just a normal citizen to echo their voice. He realized that he has to act as a leader, and I think in the past few months, it's very I'm very happy the way that he's working. He's showing leadership qualities, and that has changed 100% from a few months ago. And it is very welcoming for the Iranian people.
What about, let me ask you this, because I mean, I understand that, the Crown Prince is quite popular, within and without Iran. What about Western leaders? What about support at the United Nations level? Because I mean, not that I'm waiting for them to do anything, because, quite frankly, they've been appalling in regards to Israel. But I mean, the UN is quite good at talking about freedom and peace and democracies and all those beautiful things. They don't really commit to helping the people calling for freedom, democracy, and peace to achieve those goals. Excuse me. And so I'm just wondering, has the Crown Prince develop some, I mean, at least was he given some promises that help is on the way, will be on the way, should X, Y, Z happen? Is there a plan in terms of a tangible plan of action with the support of the international community? Because I understand obviously that Israel and the Crown Prince have, aligned interests in that they want to see the back of the RSGC and its proxies and of course bring democracy and not necessarily democracy, but freedom to Iranian and for them to decide, what is it that, their future would look like, if it's democracy, if it's a cross in between a monarchy and a democracy. It's not the point. The point is for the people of Iran to decide that that's what they want, and decide together through a consensus. But what about the rest of the world? Is there some support? Because it can't happen without some support.
That's definitely right. You and I give up. I don't think UN is going to do anything. UN, actually, I wrote an article about a week ago, 2 weeks ago, that I think the United Nations is a wrong name for it. It should be United Dictatorship Governments or something. Is because it's the governments. They don't think about nations at all. And no nation is being represented. For example, with regard to Iran, Islamic Republic is not a representative of Iranian people.
Yeah.
So therefore, but do we have a say in UN at all? The nation as a whole? No. It's the Islamic government, the Islamic Republic, who has the say over there. As with regard to the West, I cannot understand why they're still trying to negotiate with the Islamic Republic when they know that they doesn't have any support within Iran. They know that in the elections, past elections, only a few percentage of people went and actually participated in the elections. So therefore, I don't know why they still insist in having a dialogue and talking to the Iranian government or Islamic Republic, not the Iranian government.
Don't you think it's because the Islamic Republic of Iran and the RSGC with it hold the reign of power? So they may not have popular support, and so they don't have legitimacy. But they still have the upper hand militarily speaking, in that the opposition in Iran is not armed. They did not weaponize their revolution. So it's impossible for them to offer, I would say, a counterbalance to that, that power struggle, at least as far as the actions on the ground are concerned. And so I think what gives is that from the West perspectives, the RSGC hold the cards for now. And I think that because they have managed to establish this web of proxies, through Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, and others, there's a belief now that they are too big to fail, almost, that to oppose them or challenge them would mean taking on those proxies and potentially disrupting the status quo. And this is something that no one is prepared to do. The only party here willing to do the right thing is actually Israel. And I think it's quite sad that Israel, which is a very small country, lost in the Middle East, is stepping up where superpowers should be stepping up, at least in terms of, the military capacity. So Israel has the tech, Israel has the will, Israel has I would say, the courage to do something. But Israel is a small country. 9 million people versus 80, 81, 86 in Iran. I mean, it's insane, that the only voice of reason, I would say right now, is Israel. And when it comes to the Islamic Republic, and also the understanding that it's not about just deposing a regime, it's about freeing a people, many people, because you have Iranians, you have the Lebanese, the Iraqis, the Yemenis, the Syrian, and the list goes on, to free them from fascism, theo-fascism, to free communities, religious community that up to today, right now, are still under the thumb of the RSGC and at the mercy of their guns. And I don't think that it's sinking, and I don't understand why. So maybe you can enlighten me. Do people understand that in Iran, that this that it is an exercise in colonization? I mean, we wrote about this together in Jerusalem Post, actually.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I think Israel understands Iranians, or they understand what the situation is, because they live in the region. The cultural ties is so close that we can understand and we feel each other. As with the Western world, they don't have that understanding of what is going on over there. They see the problems or what is going on over there from their own perspective, and their own perspective is not a right one. Is what do you call it? Anyway, it's a different perspective that is not close to the reality. Therefore, that and another thing, I think the West is to my belief is destroying themselves from within. It's look, we are going down as the Russians, or not Russia, or Chinese, or other countries that are coming up, but instead of, maybe it's a bit colonial, sorry about that.
Okay.
I'm thinking about imperialistic, but the West has lost its way, in a way. Now, going back to Iran, it's very difficult when they've talked with Iran for 45 years, and they haven't got any anything out of it. They wanted to change their behavior. Iran hasn't changed their behavior. It's got worse. They negotiated in 2015. Obama negotiated the JCPOA. What came of JCPOA is the missile system that they managed to make better their missiles. They made the missiles much more advanced and everything. That is the result of JCPOA. So West do not understand what is going on. They do not understand Islamic Republic, and in a way they help them to become what it is now.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think it's more than just in a way. It's been what do I call it, the boiling of the frog, this slow erosion of Western will to, further push the line. It's quite interesting. Stepan, I want to, I don't know if you want to step in, but I want to talk about the Iranian retaliation and regional consequences, because we don't talk about this. We talk, I mean, I feel it's been very one-sided, where everyone concentrates on, oh, goodness, Israel, dead, retaliate, dead, do something with attack. Actually, it's not, we don't talk about retaliation. We always talk about attack, which is quite interesting. But again, it's the BBC, so, it's a different way of looking at the world. But what is it that no one can understand? Actually, Israel is actually defending itself, that Israel did not want that war, did not welcome that war, did not stop the war, did not provoke it either. But it's actually going at the very heart of the problem, which is the RSGC. Everything stems from Iran. So rather than be hitting Hezbollah, and that's what Israel is doing anyway, to protect its borders, obviously something needs to happen in Iran, because Iran sends hundreds of ballistic missiles at Israel. No nation would be expected to just, sit and wait for the next round to hit. So what gives?
Well, you see, we have I guess in Europe, two very similar but different situations with Iran. We, of course, have Belarus and we have Russia, where you have a population that is potentially run by a group of people who it does not support. Certainly, that is what we are hearing from the Russian opposition in case of Russia and Belarus opposition in case of Belarus. We hear how terrible the Belarus and Russian regimes are from the people who leave those countries and come to the West and go abroad, not necessarily even to the West, to places like Georgia. But when it comes to actions within the country, they're very limited, incredibly limited. The only visible action that we see from the citizens of those two countries are the Belarusian and Russian regiments that are fighting in the Foreign Legion of the Ukrainian Armed Forces. In the case of the Russians, they actually go into Russia itself. In the case of Belarus, they're fighting in Ukraine. We don't have an Iranian Foreign Legion in Ukraine. We, of course, had the statement early on in 22 from the Crown Prince of how he condemns the war and that Russia is aligned with the Iranian Islamic Republic, and that he's against it, but there hasn't been any large-scale contribution by the Iranians in that regard. And of course, there are many Iranian weapons at play over there, and there have been deaths by the IRGC personnel in Ukraine. Actually, in Ukraine, they were in Crimea when they were struck down. For a retaliatory strike by Israel is exactly that. There can't be a direct war between them. There are two countries between them. After all, logistically, it's impossible for the two countries to fight. As you said yourself, Israel has 2 million people. How far can you really stretch that line? So for Israel to physically go to Iran is beyond belief.
No, I don't think they would do it. But don't you think that there's something to be said about the fact that Israel was the only country? We were always being told that, oh no, you can't attack Iran. It's not possible. It's not durable, and the world will collapse, and Pandora's box would explode in our faces. Well, Israel, I think, has proven that no, that it could do that successfully. That it was, I think it made a point that the IRGC can no longer hide behind its proxy, that there are direct consequences on the ground that they would have to suffer should they continue that trajectory. And so my question is, why is it that it's so hard for other nations to actually understand that something quite historical happened? The tide was broken. What are they waiting for? Quite clearly, the dynamics were changed on Friday, and yet there's been very little support in terms of what happened. Everybody's like, oh my God, you could potentially start World War III. Well, I think you already started. In a way, because if you do nothing, it will happen. And I think that the only way forward to actually allow peace and regime change, because you can't have it without it, was for Israel to actually show the IRGC and Khamenei that no, you will no longer terrorize the region and us, one country that wants to be stubbornly a sovereign on its land, without consequences. And I think it's a good way to show others in the region that, well, you can do the same. Join the club.
I guess that's kind of what I was trying to say. That my point was that with the forces in Ukraine, you have people who are actively trying to push back against those regimes. With Iran, you have flashes, I would say, within the country of protests. But protests are not the same as armed resistance, and they're not the same as armed personnel actively training in combat, which is what is happening in Ukraine. So then, unless you have, as you said, Iran is 80 million people, unless you have a large internal base that is eager to take this on, it's very difficult for a foreign power to come in and essentially occupy, because what you're suggesting is an occupation of Iran by a foreign power and regime change. You can't have one and the other without somebody internally doing the job for them. or for themselves.
People need to be, Iranian needs to do it for themselves. I'm not an advocate of boots on the ground. I don't think it would work. It didn't work with Iraq. I mean, the result is that, and now it's under the boot of the RGC. So clearly getting rid of Saddam Hussein the way it was done did not help. So I don't encourage anyone to try to replicate that model. But what we need to do is create a structure that would allow Iranians to rise up. Right now they can't do it. But at the same time, the regime today is greatly weakened. I'm sure that Afshin would agree with me with that.
Yeah.
So the
Well,
question is, what's next? What do we do now?
as you mentioned, the West hyped up what IRGC, or the Iranian Islamic Republic power is, and Israel showed that this wasn't the case. They are much weaker than what they are. And if you go back about 4 years ago, or 4.5 years ago, when Trump was at power, he was policing the sanctions, and Iranian government didn't have even money to pay their own supporters. And their supporters, they were starting to rise up against them. They wanted their money. and John Kerry apparently went to Zarif and told him, just hang on a couple of months, we are going to get into power. They knew that they were going to get into power. So therefore, as soon as they came, they closed their eyes on the sanctions. They gave them even money, cash money, by freeing the hostages or whatever. And they gave them life. So therefore, we need support. We need to police the sanctions. If there's sanctions and they don't allow any money to get in there, the regime doesn't have, all his supporters are there because of the money. If the money stops, they're not going to support the regime. At the same time,
is that true for here as well? I hear you about Iran. I know that, and I agree with you. I think that much of the support is either out of convenience or because there's something to be gained, as opposed to pure ideology. Although you have a few nutters. What about here? Because the RGC have kind of exported this ideology, not just across the proxies, but again, they're there because they're being supported, they're being paid, to behave that way. But what about, those RGC outposts here in the UK, or in the US, or in Paris and Berlin, for example? They're all across, the European continent, not just the EU, but they're here in the UK too. What about those people? Do you think it's out of ideology that they exported, I would say, their spokespeople that do it because they believe in the message? Or is it again about money, in which case then maybe we onto something that you just need to kind of cut the tap?
Obviously, there are some Muslims who have been brainwashed here. For example, it could be Pakistanis or British Muslims, which they're brainwashed as the Islamic Republic is standing for Islam, is standing against the West and everything because of the kuffar. They've got the right to do, and they're standing for Islam. There are some that, but with regard to Iranian supporters of them, is against money. There's some of them who have made money who came here. And we can see in London they're driving around with Porsches and Ferraris and everything, So if you maybe confiscate their money or freeze their money, they're going to go against the Islamic regime as well. So it goes back to money again. As with regard to the support of the Iranian people, you talk about the armed groups and everything. We don't have support. We don't have Iranian outside support. For example, there are a lot of Iranians who are willing to fight, but we don't have arms, we don't have money or anything to do that. Even when they rise up, they go out. They want to make cocktail Molotov. The price of the used car oil, because they use half car oil and also they use petrol. The price of used car oil went up by 10 times. So they don't have money to buy this. The Islamic Republic has made us so poor that we cannot even buy materials to fight them.
Yeah. I'm afraid that's I mean, Stepan, if you wanna have the last argument, but that's we out of time for our first webinar. Afshin, thank you so much for being our first
Can I
guest.
mention something?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, I realize Europeans and Americans are afraid of if the regime collapses, there's going to be a power vacuum. And that is their worry. And that is maybe one of the reasons that they support, because I've spoken to many of the MPs and politicians here, and that is what. But what they don't realize, if Khamenei dies, the power struggle after him is going to be the dangerous one, because they have the power, they have the arms. Then it's going to be an armed struggle between them. There's going to be internal war there. And then that is going to break the country down. So that is the danger that they should think of, not the power vacuum. If the people, if the regime collapses, people can take over the country. Prince Reza is there, people are there, they know. But if there's a power struggle and war there, then they cannot.
I think you just given us the next subject for our webinar. I think it would be a very interesting topic to explore, because it is true, I agree, it hasn't been talked about, and I think the real danger is there. Not so much in the revolution or regime change, is the collapse of Khamenei's leadership and the fight that will ensue. Because, I mean, they are fighting. We know this, but I think that the West doesn't appreciate just how many people are out there to get the position, and it's going to create a lot of torment for Iranians. Stepan, I'm going to give you the final words of the day.
Well, I think Afshin put it very well, that the internal power struggle is something that's going to be probably the most violent. And of course, the problem is that the person who is closest to the symbols of power, in the case of a country like Iran, it's inevitably somebody with guns. So the army, the person closest to that, will be able to get hold of power the quickest and hold on to it. And much more likely that it is somebody within the RGC, for example, than somebody who's current in the country. That's the game. The game is to make sure that that does not happen for the people of Iran. Because surely they would not want the same upon. Hopefully that is indeed something for another topic. But thank you. Terribly sorry to those who came to see Ben. Unfortunately, it is something that is beyond our control. A building evacuation is not something that we predicted.
No. I mean, I think I think it was I don't know. There's always something happening. So that was the one thing of the day. So there we are. But Afshin, thank you so much. So Afshin Payaravi, who's the director of the Association of Iranian Human Rights and Allies, was our guest today. Benham Taleblu did a very brief appearance and shall join us hopefully very soon. And thank you, Stepanenko, for stepping in and saving the day. And there was me, Catherine Perez-Shakdam, who was the host of the day for our first ever webinar at the Forum for Foreign Relations. So thank you so much for those who attended, and those of you who will listen to it on YouTube. We thank you very much. Have a great day and speak to you soon.
Goodbye.
Thank you very much.